Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pull from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises. I guess that kind of we're doing tonight. This is part of our podcast channel From the Queue. On this episode, we are going to discuss the 1992 Academy Awards. Please subscribe, like, and review From the Queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting app, especially Spotify and Apple, so you can get the algorithms going with positive feedback. You can also find our channel on BlueSky at From the Queue. You can also find us through Instagram at From the Queue and Threads. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, all of our links will be in the description below. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cuson. You can find me on BlueSky at JeromeC1985. My co-host, of course, is Brian at Brian to Brain on Twitter for now. Brian, we are not reviewing a movie. We're not reviewing a TV show. We're not even reviewing wrestling this week. We are postponing our Right Match series until next week because this Sunday, of course, is the Academy Awards, and we decided, well, let's watch a ceremony from the past, and let's go deep. Let's really go back a ways just to see how things have changed, how things have kind of stayed the same. So we decided on 1992. What a fascinating year. So the 1992 Academy Awards, of course, giving awards for movies that all came out in 1991. Some of the prominent movies that came out in 1991 that are mentioned throughout this broadcast. I'm just going to list a few of them. This is by no means a comprehensive list. We have Silence of the Lambs, which probably was the biggest winner of the night. We also have JFK, one of Oliver Stone's most notable and controversial movies. We also have Thelma and Louise, which has definitely stayed around. Boys in the Hood, which is very notable, putting John Singleton on the map in a huge way. One of the youngest nominees ever, was nominated for screenplay and director. And then we've got a couple movies, Brian, that I have to say, heavily nominated, not sure how much they've stuck around in the zeitgeist. That being Prince of Tides, which I'm going to give Barbra Streisand the benefit of the doubt. This is a blind spot for me, so maybe I'm misspeaking, but I feel very confident in saying that Bugsy probably should not have been nominated 10 times. It's not great. Not great, everyone. But yes, 1991 was a very interesting year. We also have Terminator 2, which did very well in some of the technical categories. And history was made this year, Brian. Billy Crystal calls it a cartoon, which feels very demeaning in some way, but this is the first year that an animated movie was ever nominated for Best Picture, and that, of course, being Beauty and the Beast, which also did exceedingly well in the song category. Brian, are you glad that we took a look back at this year, at 1992's Academy Awards?
Oh, I'm glad for various reasons, because the reason we actually picked this year in particular is because I had this recorded on VHS growing up. Like, my parents recorded it. Obviously, it was a big time in the 90s to record TV specials on the networks and whatever, so this was one of them, obviously. So they recorded the Academy Awards, and I found it years later in my teens, and that's when I was kind of discovering films for the first time and that kind of deal. That was when I was watching JFK for the first time as well, movies like that. Barton Fink, which also got nominations this particular evening. It was really cool to see this again from when I was like remembering all the memories watching it on VHS, recorded VHS in the mid 2000s in my teens when it was recorded in 1992 live. So it was just really trippy. It's available on YouTube. There's like a smaller 2-hour cut that's available, and there's like a playlist posted by the Academy themselves that kind of fills in the blanks, but it's worth going through. There's a lot of great memories. Billy Crystal, what can I say? The dude is a very elegant host. He doesn't insult his guests. He makes you feel comfortable, like you're at home. Maybe that's the key. Maybe we shouldn't insult the people who are we're being like so generous to at the Oscars every year. Like why do we have these hosts that insult the guests nowadays? Is that like the modern thing? I don't know, but still, it was nice to see that. It was very pleasant. So there's a lot going on for this Oscar show. I mean, the fact that Beauty and the Beast it was like the first animated film ever to be nominated. The second, according to my research, is Toy Story 3, which I thought was crazy because I could have sworn Lion King got nominated, but I guess not. So that's a whole other discussion for later on. But man, just seeing Beauty and the Beast get all the love, and seeing one of my favorite R&B artists, Peebo Bryson, perform, amazing. Because Peebo Bryson, ladies and gentlemen, is not even in the Disney Legends Hall of Fame or whatever, and yet he has sung the songs from Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, and those were back-to-back years. And that dude just like owned on the charts. So I don't know. I feel like that dude got overlooked in terms of like the legends of Disney history in terms of the singers, but man, yeah, People Bryson, and then you got of course Celine Dion performing in here as well. Angela Lansbury, like just a lot of great stuff. Jerry Orbach performing like live. It's crazy to me because I can picture him in the booth singing like he thinks. I just feel like he needed a lot of work in the booth, but when he performed live, he shows you that he's a real stage performer, man. And I don't know his history offhand, but it feels like Jerry Orbach
He is very much known for Broadway. I mean, I think that
Okay,
when you
there it
look at a
is.
lot of Law and Order people, that's what they're known for. I mean, I think we associate Jerry Orbach, I think, with one of two things: either the mean dad from Dirty Dancing, or playing Lenny on Law and Order. But I mean, he's a Broadway performer. That was his song and dance, pun very much intended. So yeah, I mean, it was great seeing him
Incredible
perform
performance. I
because
thought he did incredible that night.
I mean, I think that they had all the voices pretty much for the singing, and I think that really just added to it. And let's be honest, the songs from Beauty and the Beast are incredible, and I think a lot of times the best original song category doesn't work because the songs aren't actually from the movie, or they're an ancillary part. Here, like, not only are they a part of the movie, but I mean, when you have the Bell song, I mean, the Bell song was the first one. It's nominated. It's the third best song in the movie, and it's still being performed at the Academy Awards. I think that just speaks to how good all three of the songs were. And you want to talk about well deserving. Beauty and the Beast winning for both score and song I mean, there should not have even been other nominees. I don't care what the other nominees were. No offense to Brian Adams, because that fucking song has been stuck in my head for the last 48 hours. But sorry, Brian Adams, but you're not even close.
Man, because I remember Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves so like vividly as a kid. I watched that VHS a lot, and of course they play that song a lot. So I was a big fan of that song as a kid. So when I didn't even realize it got nominated this year. I didn't even put two and two. I just thought like Beauty and the Beast was like all gonna just dominate this category, and then there was like one other song. But it turns out it was the Brian Adams song, and I really like it a lot. And I don't know if we could have a Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves discussion one day, maybe a Kevin Costner month or something. But it's cheesy, and his accent goes in and out. But goddamn it, that movie's entertaining with Christian Slater and, of course, Alan Rickman. I believe there's a cameo of Sean Connery at the end of it when King Richard comes back. So I love that movie a lot. And the fact that this came out the same year, that I didn't put two and two together again, that this and JFK were the same year, like it felt like Kevin Costner was like on top of the world. And I know that's crazy to say, but like going off of like Bull Durham and Field of Dreams at towards the end of the 80s, going into his Oscar run with, Dances with Wolves, and then having a year like 1991 was like, wow. No wonder like they put all the money in the world in his pocket for Waterworld, and that didn't work out at all. But seeing his like career up to this point, including The Bodyguard, I think came out this year as well. So like, I don't know, or 91 it came out, but still like he was having a hell of a run, and I could see why they overpaid him on Waterworld, and that was a disaster. But this was peak Kevin Costner, I think, and this was cool to see.
Yes, absolutely. So, where do we want to go? I think we can start by talking about the beginning montage, which was just basically a bunch of physical comedy and pratfalls. And what's notable about this montage is I feel like if I think montages can be extremely annoying on the Oscars. It's one of my least favorite parts, but for some reason, this one really struck me because it just makes you realize you don't get these kind of comedies anymore, and you don't really see a lot of physical comedy anymore, and I think it's a lost art. and it really just made me nostalgic. And the funny thing is that recently Naked Gun was announced as being rebooted. I believe that Liam Neeson is going to be in the titular role, and it just sucks that we don't have the opportunity to have more physical comedy. I mean, because this montage had a lot of Charlie Chaplin, a lot of Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart, and really just kind of going back to the screwball comedies of the 30s and 40s. And again, you just don't see that anymore. So that was tremendous. And then you had Billy Crystal's monologue, which was fine. The Anita Hill joke, I don't know how well that is aged, but Clarence Thomas is still in the Supreme Court, and that sucks. And then you kind of get into the awards, and then you get into the rhythm of them. And I mean, it very much feels like there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, the fashion has changed. Some of the faces have changed. Some of the faces on the same people have changed. Not saying any names, but I think in a lot of ways it feels like it has 32 years later. A lot of the rhythms, a lot of the feeling, a lot of the writing feels very similar.
Yeah, I like the flow of the show a lot. I feel like the modern Oscars that I have watched lately in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, they have this slow pace to them, but I feel like this had a good pace that was like, okay, let's keep things moving, let's not slow things down. But I don't know if they just cut it out, but there wasn't an in memoriam, and I don't know if they started that much later on. So that's probably another thing that kind of kills the crowd a little bit, because that definitely, brings the crowd down. But in this case, it didn't seem like there was one, so that kind of crept the crowd up. And I think the musical performances really kept the crowd up, especially when you got quality songs from Beauty and the Beast. I think you're gonna get that emotional reaction, and there was those crowd members. You can just hear the love for Beauty and the Beast whenever they announced the performances or the singers. So there was a lot of anticipation for the performances that night. So I think that really helped the flow of the show, especially at the beginning. When it kind of it started out with the Jack Palance winning Best Supporting Actor, which I thought was incredible, because I still remember that speech, him doing the one arm push ups and talking about how the insurance didn't want to cover him because he was too old or blah blah blah. But it's one of the most memorable speeches because it kind of inspires you, and it kind of reminds me of Sting. You know what I mean? Jack Palance was 72, maybe 73 when he made City Slickers and won the Oscar, and doing push-ups on stage, and I just think of Sting. So that was really cool, and kind of where Sting's at right now. And we're kind of a couple days away from his last match. So when we're recording this, but yeah, just, I don't know what it is, but it's cool that I think of Jack Palance and Sting now in terms of their career and how they just kind of went out their way. And it feels like Jack Palance definitely went out his way, even with the sequel. He still did a good job at the sequel. And I'm a big City Slickers fan, so this was really cool to see. And hopefully one day maybe we can cover City Slickers. I feel like at our age, me and Jerome's age now, that shit hits home really much harder now because it was a movie about, adults in their mid to late 30s, and we're now at that age. So I feel like that's more relevant now anyway. But it was cool to see this movie get some love here at the Oscars as well. And in terms of writing and stuff, there was no way it was going to compete, but it was good to see Jack Palance get his win.
Jack Palance is tremendous. I mean, I think you look at City Slickers, you look at Batman '89, and I'm sure there's a lot out there to see of him. And I mean, he just brings the old school Hollywood with him. And I would agree with you that getting a chance to see him grace the stage was tremendous. I don't really have any hot takes on Mercedes Rule for the Fisher King. It's amazing that Robin Williams was nominated as well, and he was in his blonde hair, so that means he was either filming or just got done filming Toys. And boy, oh boy, is that a movie that we will never talk about on this podcast. So there's a lot of awards that I don't think you and I could really talk about. I think we've kind of addressed Best Original Score and Best Song. We've talked about Beauty and the Beast. Let's talk about some of the technical categories, and this is where Terminator 2 Judgment Day winning for Best Sound, Best Sound Effects, Best Makeup, Best Visual Effects. I mean, again, for Best Visual Effects, the other two nominees were Backdraft and Hook. And I'm literally sitting there, I'm like, why even show up? Why even have the other nominees? Just say it's Terminator 2. What a great night for Terminator 2, even though, they don't really get Best Picture, and maybe we could get into that a little bit. But 4 Academy Awards for Terminator 2, I think speaks to just how unbelievably influential that movie is, was, and even is today. And I think it's worth noting that a couple people mentioned Jim Cameron's name because he had not yet won Best Director. He would win Best Director 5 years later for Titanic, and I think it's just notable that that he was mentioned in all four of the thank you speeches. And yeah, just a good night for Terminator 2. Not a big surprise. I mean, it deserved all of the awards that it was nominated for.
Yeah, and I think I don't know who it was. I want to say it was Stan Winston, maybe, but someone said that one day Jim Cameron's going to be up here accepting one of these, and dude, he was right. Dude was so right. It's like if you were to be a betting man at the time, I would say the odds were like, fuck, I don't know, minus 300, minus 400 that this guy was going to win an Oscar in the next 5 years. So yeah, what a great call. But yeah, like best visual effects, I can only see Backdraft competing because to this day, I still think that the Universal Studios here in LA still has the Backdraft Fire Show, which is really cool live, no matter what age. But they still show clips of the movie from 1991, so I always think that's a trip. And yeah, I mean, Terminator 2, like my God, like I mean, it does. I did think it deserved like a Best Director nomination for sure. Over maybe I don't know, maybe Thelma and Louise. I think would take out the Best Director and replace Ridley Scott with that, and put James Cameron in there. But I'm glad it like at least got the technical awards and it got people noticing, you know, the work that these people were doing with James Cameron in that movie, and like Stan Winston, who we've talked about before, with like The Thing and all that kind of stuff, and like his history of makeup, wins an Oscar here for his makeup work. And I got to shout out too, like Hook gets nominated for best makeup, which I think makes sense because all these years I never knew. Um, God, who's the guy that's in the cameo? It's a woman actor, a famous woman actor, Glenn Close. She has a cameo in Hook as a male older pirate, and I never knew that until like 2 years ago. And that goes to show you how great that makeup job was. And considering the whole movie too, I felt like Dustin Hoffman did look the part with his makeup too. So I thought they did a really good job in that. So you got to give credit to that. But of course, the money is the makeup job on the Terminator 1000 and how they pulled that off amazingly well in 1991. So you got to give credit where credit's due. And Star Trek 6 gets some love too that night, which is crazy because we've talked about it before in our ranking the Star Trek movies podcast. But I would say Undiscovered Country does have great makeup work for the Klingons because it's the guy who plays Red in that 70s show, right? I forget his name, but you can hardly tell it's him. And I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, Jerome, but that's him, the dad from that 70s show, as like one of the. I think he's the guy that gets shot in Star Trek
Kurtwood
6.
Smith.
But, yeah, and the makeup is so good in that. I hardly recognize him, so I got to give credit to all three. But Terminator 2 definitely ahead of its time and worth all the awards it won that night. Bugsy gets a lot of the art direction awards, which I guess we can talk about it now. I saw the movie.
A big fat meh. I mean, like if it's
15
gonna
years ago,
win
I saw
those, if it's gonna win the award, it's gonna win those. I watched Bugsy and I was like, because I knew that, I kind of read the IMDb. I was like, oh, it got nominated for 10 Academy Awards. This will be interesting. And I just walked away from it feeling pretty cold. I was like, this is like a 3-star movie. Like it's not terrible, but it's not, to me, I don't know. Maybe you had to be there in 1992. Maybe this is just when Warren Beatty was so white hot that like he couldn't be denied. But I don't know. I was very unimpressed with the movie, and to see it like even with the awards that it did, like to me for costume design, I look at the nominees and I'm like, I think the Addams Family or Barton Fink would have been a better choice. I look at what's the other best art direction. I mean, it's tough to say. I don't feel qualified to really bring that one up, but yeah, it's just the Oscars that did win. I'm just kind of meh on.
See, the thing with Bugsy is that like the story's not that great, but like visually, like the artistic work is there. That's why we kind of won like the art direction, I think. But,
I mean, I guess, but
I mean, because it's a period piece, and they're always going to reward period pieces, right? When honestly,
and that's
I think
that's the
Hook is the
problem.
one that should have won. Like Hook should have won for me for art direction because that movie stands out to this day, in terms of like colors and stuff, and Rufio, the way that character is designed. Like,
Right.
I feel like that's the like to me that was kind of like the one that was like, that should have been like the one, because especially like I don't know if you remember the scene in Hook where like they finally show the invisible food and how colorful everything looked in that one shot, and I felt like God, That's a Spielberg moment right there. So I thought that was kind of like a missed opportunity to kind of reward them for that. And Hook didn't really get a lot of love. It got nominated, but again, that's kind of one of those Spielberg movies that people are in the middle about, I guess, because it didn't get the love, obviously, but it did get some technical nominations. But in terms of that, it looks like, Bugsy was on top and Terminator 2 was on top. JFK Best Cinematography makes sense because that movie is what, black and white going to color, back and forth, and then the editing is like back and forth, timeline wise, right? I haven't seen it in a while, but you're probably more familiar with it than
I mean, it's JFK. We're going back into the left, right? We're going back into the left a lot.
I mean, yes, that's the obvious joke, but honestly, that movie is like cut extremely well. Like, it has a lot going for it. Like, I think if you put that movie,
the fact that it won Best Film Editing and Best Cinematography, it's pretty amazing because I feel like the Best Picture winner tends to win one of those two awards, and it won neither. And it's weird because you watch the first 2 hours of this show, and you wouldn't even know that Silence of the Lambs was like a heavy favorite or one of the best movies of the year because it gets mentioned a few times for nominations, but you're really looking at JFK winning Best Film Editing, Cinematography. T2 wins 4 Academy Awards. Beauty and the Beast wins its 2. And then the final hour of the show, it's Silence of the Lambs for the rest of the night. But before we get there, any other thoughts on JFK? I mean, I know that it's a favorite of mine. I know that it is not historically accurate. That's not what I'm looking for when I sit down to watch an Oliver Stone movie. But my God, it is a tour de force of great performances all across the board. Very notable actors, just some really, really interesting editing choices, great camera choices. Yeah, man, I know that JFK is not historically accurate, and I'm not going to pretend like it's something where we need to take it completely seriously, but it's excellent.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of got that Oppenheimer kind of vibe before Oppenheimer. You know what I mean? The big giant cast, again, like set in like a certain time period, political, very political in this case. So it's very memorable for me, not in terms of like the plot, because you're kind of like, okay, we don't really know who was, really shot JFK by the end of the movie, but it's all about, I think, the technical aspects of that movie and how it really delivers, like in terms of like the editing and the cinematography. So I'm glad they won for both, because I really think that movie is like it's very long, but it's well put together, kind of like an Oppenheimer. Is why it's kind of my comparison is that. But yeah, Silence of the Lambs taking over the second half. Man, it's a really great run to see because again, you mentioned that they don't talk about Silence of the Lambs much. I mean, Billy Crystal does come out with the mask, which is pretty funny. But this run, and I don't know if it's slightly controversial because are you on that kind of with the argument that I don't know, Anthony Hopkins should not have been nominated for Best Lead, he should have been Best Supporting.
Yes, he absolutely should have been Best Supporting Actor. I mean, that is probably the most egregious and obscene aspect of this award show. I mean, look, it's an incredible performance. I mean, you just watch the scene that they show during the nominations, and it's like, well, I really want to go watch Silence of the Lambs, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. I mean, Best Actor, it's a weird mishmash. I mean, De Niro's in Cape Fear, like it's definitely B-level De Niro. Warren Beatty is Bugsy. What a big pile of whatever. I feel like I really need to watch Prince of Tides. That's what I need to do. I just need to sit down and watch Prince of Tides because Nick Nolte is pretty great. Nick Nolte, he's an old man now, but my God, was he great in his day. So yeah, Jonathan Demme for director, a big fan. I mean, I think he's underrated at this point. He's just a super underrated guy, and I would really love to see him. I would have loved to have seen him kind of get his flowers, but unfortunately, he has since passed on. Any other thoughts on the directing category?
Yeah, I would say he kind of deserved it. I felt like, man, John Singleton. Did you see the reaction that John Singleton had? It felt like his heart broke. That felt like
he was mad. He was big mad.
And because, I guess because what? No one got nominations in terms of acting from that movie either. Boys in the Hood. And I think Boys in the Hood is way better than Bugsy. You know what I mean? Like maybe that should have been like the fifth slot to the Bugsy, or maybe Terminator.
All I'm gonna say is John Singleton knew like this is his chance, and the thing is, you just don't know that you're going to be back, and John Singleton never got nominated again, and that's the thing. And I don't know, maybe he didn't know it in the moment, but that disappointment is understandable. Like, you just never know if you're going to be able to come back, and you didn't, and it sucks. But yeah, I mean, just Oliver Stone. I mean, a two-time directing. I mean, just an incredible run. His 1986 to 1996 is unbelievable. You look at Ridley Scott. I mean, what a legend. Definitely a very up and down career, especially at the end. But man, just unbelievable. And anything else about Best Picture? Any? Because I know if I had my druthers, I would for sure take Bugsy out and replace that with Terminator 2. I would strongly consider taking out Prince of Tides and replacing it with Thelma and Louise.
Wow. Okay. So it's again one of those tough years. I mean, Silence of the Lambs, I think, totally deserved it. And I know Beauty
I
and the
mean,
Beast.
there's no doubt. I want to be
Yeah.
clear. One of the reasons that I think you picked this year and I said yes is because there was not going to be an argument about like the awards. For the most part, in terms of the awards, I would say this is a very strong year. There are very few of these that I go like, well, how the hell did that happen? I mean, like Best Supporting Actress, again, I don't really have a hot take about it. I generally am good with the awards as they are. I mean, Thelma and Louise winning for screenplay, I think that's makes sense. Silence of the Lambs deserved the awards that it got. So yeah, I don't have a lot of issues with the awards.
Yeah, and I think over time, I think Silence of the Lambs has become an even greater pop culture phenomenon than when it even came out, if that makes sense. Because I felt like the Hannibal show exposed it to another generation, and now it's kind of like it's one of those movies that I talk to friends about, and and some of them are not like horror fans, but they say, oh, they love Silence of the Lambs, and even though I don't even consider it a horror movie, I just consider it like a strong psychological crime thriller. And in terms of editing too, I think it's phenomenally edited. And I think one of the greatest things about that movie is the false setup at the end when you think Jodie Foster is gonna go to that one. They switched I think the thing where the cops are gonna break into that house and they think it's Bill, but it's not, and Jodie Foster ends up in that house. I think that's incredible editing, which is why I got nominated for best editing too. But I think it's one of those like incredible moments that it's kind of like exemplifies the whole film as a whole. Like I feel like it's a one in a million almost, because it's a mix of the performances mixed with like the taboo kind of nature of cannibalism itself, and like this whole thing about the obsession with serial killers, and that's a big thing in America obviously now. If you watch all these Netflix documentaries that come out on Hulu and whatnot too, like it's a big obsession with killers in America, and this fits right in there. And like this idea that it's this iconic character now, like Hannibal Lecter. So I think it really like stands the test of time. And we kind of teased it last week, but this film came out at February 91, carried all that momentum on video. And I guess we could talk about Orion Pictures really quick. I guess this is like the rise and fall of Orion Pictures. Big producers back in the day, or um, if you ever saw the Orion Pictures logo, it's usually on a VHS, but they produced a lot of, I think they produced Platoon, right? So they were on a high, marker. They're like a modern A24, it feels like, or a Focus Features in the early 2000s. So, and then they went kind of under, and now they're like not even around. I think they're a subsidiary maybe, but man, Orion Pictures was like a big deal back in the day, because I remember that logo on a lot of VHSs, man. So that was really cool. And this is like an Orion Pictures joint, so to speak. So that's, the rise and fall of a great production
like
company.
the Orion Pictures funeral, because I mean they're all kind of talking about it as if it's gone already, and I mean it's really depressing, because I think that is such a huge part of so many movies of that era, and it just feels like those independent producers. It feels like you don't have as many of those. Like you still got your A24s, but it just doesn't feel like you have nearly the amount that is deserved that are making these kinds of movies. And Silence of the Lambs, I think, is very different from a lot of modern um, Oscar contenders in that it is much more of a horror movie than you would see. And that is not to say that it is a pure horror movie. I would agree, it is definitely more of that psychological thriller, but you don't really get horror movies ever nominated. And it just feels like, I think one of the big changes, and certainly in the 80s and 90s, you do get those, you get the Oscar bait. but it feels like the Oscar bait is its own category now. That's just really unfortunate because I feel like we are so restricted to the movies that can actually be nominated. So to me, when I see a Barbie that gets nominated, I see that as a positive thing. But again, Oppenheimer's probably going to win a whole host of Oscars, and that is a very Oscar baity movie. And I really like Oppenheimer, but it just feels like Everything Everywhere All at Once was just so different compared to so many of the other Academy Award winners. And it just feels like we're kind of in this big back and forth between movies that traditionally don't win and then back to the tradition. And I would really like to get at a stage where different kinds of movies can be nominated. If that means that Godzilla 01 gets nominated one year, then that's what we should do. And I know you're not going to disagree with that.
Yeah, and I feel like this extension now to the 7 or 10 or whatever it's going to be, depending on the year, it's allowed that. But I feel like I don't know, because I don't know. We'll see about Barbie because I'm halfway through the movie and it's kind of a hard sit through me because I'm just kind of confused by it. But maybe it is like a lot of people's best picture picks. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. But I mean, it's directed by a talented director, so it's hard for me to say that, you know what I'm saying? But I can see why it's nominated in terms of like gaining an audience, right? Because you need that kind of audience. The ratings have been up and down for the Oscars, right? And just for the record, according to Nielsen ratings, this had 44 million people watching this broadcast, which is nuts. And just to kind of compare it today, I think it's like 1/3 of that, maybe a fourth of that, are people watching the Oscars nowadays. So it's definitely gone down in popularity, but I think a movie like Barbie is something that can draw in a general audience that it kind of needs. So instead of introducing stupid categories, just I guess nominate a Barbie like that and you'll have an audience.
I mean, I don't think movies is part of the monoculture like it used to be. I mean, certainly Barbenheimer was a huge event. I'll be very curious to see how that translates to viewers. That's going to be the big question because Barbenheimer, obviously, again, drew one of the biggest box offices ever in terms of that first weekend. And how is that going to translate to viewers? Because one of those movies is likely to win a number of Oscars, and Barbie certainly is going to be featured prominently because Ryan Gosling is going to be singing the Ken song. So it's definitely something where both movies are going to play a factor in the ceremony, perhaps in different ways, but we'll see how that all shakes out. So that is the 1992 Academy Awards, a fascinating time. I want to point a couple of other things out. Great to see Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman out. They were the ones that announced Best Picture. It's just very cool to see that, a great pairing. Brian, was it weird to you that Tom Hanks got booed? Because that almost that was a moment. That really feels like, when would Tom Hanks ever get booed again after this?
Well, he hadn't won the Oscar yet, right? And Philadelphia comes out a year later. Also, I forgot to mention that there's a Ray Harryhausen tribute in this Oscars. So one day, Jerome.
Tom Hanks. It's Tom Hanks that
introduced
the Science Awards, and a part of it was Ray Harryhausen. So yeah.
Oh man, one day, Jerome, we're gonna watch The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and you're gonna be like, I can't believe they made that dragon in 1958, and it's so movable, and you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna be shocked. I'm telling you, one day. But it was cool to see that.
I want to thank you. Tom Hanks would be nominated for Academy Award the next year for A League of Their Own. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. 2 years later, he would be nominated and win for Philadelphia. Then the next year, he would win again for Forrest Gump. So he did his back-to-back run just a couple of years after this.
And he had the one nomination for Big, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, he had a nomination for Big, and he's certainly been nominated a few other times as well. But I don't know that you're going to see Tom Hanks win another Academy Award unless it's an honorary one. So that's
and
that's
you gotta mention that Tom Hanks should have hosted the Oscars one day. And is it too late? Is it too late?
I don't know. You know what? I would really, to me, if I were a producer, I would look at the idea of having a multi-generational trio or duo of hosts. So one of the suggestions that I made is have the cast of the murder show from Hulu that I can't remember, Only Murders in the Building. have the cast of Only Murders in the Building, Steve Martin, who's already hosted, Martin Short, Selena Gomez, have them host the Academy Awards. I think that would be a really good idea. A few years ago, I remember Billy Crystal and Tiffany Haddish had a movie. Nobody saw it, but I was like, why not have those two host? Or I think that would be a really good idea of kind of melding generations and doing something different, because I think we need to. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel is going to stop hosting at some point, and it feels like he's pretty much the only person that wants to do it. Certainly, Chris Rock is not going to be invited back. You're not going to. Jon Stewart's certainly not going to be invited back. James Franco and Anne Hathaway, that was a disaster. I don't think Ellen DeGeneres is going to do it. So you've got to start thinking about new potential hosts. And I just don't know who's in the pipeline. And I would really love to see them again explore the idea of bringing in some different people and maybe having like a Tom Hanks and I don't know, like Tom Hanks and Glenn Powell host the Academy Awards or something like that. Just to where, again, you're getting kind of a generational thing going. Please don't have Dwayne Johnson host it. Please, 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 no Dwayne Johnson.
And I'm going to guess no Chris Pratt as well, right?
Oh, why would you even say that?
Because they love him. He's all over the place. Well, people love him, so.
I don't know.
Not you, though. Yeah. So anyway, I guess that kind of wraps up the Oscars pretty much for 1992. Incredible, fun show. Very well paced. And I guess the only other thing that I would kind of point out is, like, if you haven't seen Barton Fink, give it a chance. I know it's not a lot of people's like recommendation lists, I don't think, but I really enjoy that movie, and it's a Coen Brothers movie. Had some love that night at the Oscars. Just kind of weird that Michael Lerner got nominated instead of John Goodman, who fucking owned that movie.
Oh, this is the thing between you and I. We were texting because I've been watching Moonlighting, and I mentioned that John Goodman was in an episode, and you asked me, and I said he is one of the best actors to have never been nominated for an Academy Award, and this blew your mind.
I thought he got nominated for Barton Fink, to be honest, and that I knew someone got nominated for acting, and I just assumed it was John Goodman because he is so incredible in that movie. And by the end of that movie, you're just like, this guy is like fucking psycho. Like, it's just this transformation that goes on in the background of this movie. Because spoiler alert, he's the killer. But anyway, Michael Lerner, he's only like in the movie for 10 minutes, and he's talking about producing a wrestling picture, and he's just angry. And I was just like, what? I don't know if it was a TV rule. You know what I mean? Like, we can't nominate the TV actor. But it just felt like John Goodman got snubbed by his own co-star.
That could very easily be the case.
Yeah, it sucks because he was the best part of that movie, and I would say John Turturro was the second best actor in that movie.
All right, we are going to be doing our Right Back series next week, Brian. I know you're really excited for this one. What is it?
Oh boy, it's The Crow and Sting's last match. And people, I am a huge Sting fan. I never realized how much of a giant Sting fan I was until this last AEW run. And now I'm really emotional about it. I've never seen The Crow either. So this is great because, I mean, as of this recording, they released the first image of The Crow, which people have been talking about the remake for 15 years now, and they're finally doing it. So yeah, that's crazy timing, right? And I get to watch it for the first time. And I think they announced the 4K as well, like the 4K Blu-ray release coming out in May. So perfect timing, folks. So I'm ready to watch it for the first time. I'm really excited. We kind of thought about doing it for Superhero Pantheon, but I guess timing is everything, right? So we're going to do it with Sting's last match, and we can talk about our love of Sting and how he's been an influence in our, wrestling love for the past 40 years, and talk about all the little things like that, plus the movie. And it's kind of tragic what happened to Brandon Lee, but there's also a weird thing that I noticed with the casting in Nope. And if you noticed, one of the actors in Nope is also in The Crow, and he was also on set when Brandon Lee died. And what is Nope about? It features a scene where people die on a movie set, or a TV set, I should say, but still very coincidental. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting conversation, to be certain. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.
So do you even know who I'm talking about?